Good morning or afternoon, wherever you may be listening. Hello and welcome to today's Future of Smart Mobility webinar. My name is Gareth Ragg. I am the Managing Director of TU-Automotive, and I will be the moderator for today's conversation. I'm very pleased to say that I'm being welcomed by Raj Rao. Raj is the CEO of Ford Smart Mobility. In Ford's own words, Ford Smart Mobility is part of Ford's expanded business model to be both an automaker and a mobility company. It was designed to compete like a startup company and design and build mobility services on its own, and to also collaborate with startups and tech companies. I think today's webinar offers a really fantastic opportunity and a really fascinating one, first of its opportunity kind, to hear directly from the man at the head of this really incredibly forward-thinking company. But before we welcome Raj, I'd like to say we'd like today's webinar to be as interactive as possible. So please feel free to go on your screen right now, click onto the software, and if you have a question you'd like to pose to Raj, please do feel free to do so, and I'll try to put as many to Raj as possible whilst we go through the next few minutes. And with that, I'd like to welcome Raj to the webinar. How are you today, Raj?
I'm wonderful, Gareth. How are you doing?
Yes, I'm very well, thank you. It's a lovely day here in London. So we'll kick things off, if that's okay. And I'd just kind of like to start with a nice teeing up question of, for people that aren't quite so familiar, tell us a bit more about the focus of Ford Smart Mobility.
Sure. Thanks for the first question. I did anticipate it. So I want to start with answering that question more from a mission standpoint, and then get to our purpose. I want to do it in two parts. So let me start with the first part. So our mission, as I've shown in the first slide, is really to liberate the human journey. We feel that the achievement of that would really allow people to move around in a productive way, in a stress-free way, to keep them safe, and over time make it highly reliable. That's really our mission. Founders of Ford believed in that mission very deeply, and it's carried us through for over a century, and everything that we do resonates with that mission. So FSM, which is kind of Ford Smart Mobility acronym, is really driven by that mission. It is no different than the identity of our company as Ford. What is different, however, is that our purpose is what defines how FSM is going about carving its space in the mobility ecosystem. And what we mean by that is that our purpose really is shown on slide 1. If you please go to the next slide. Thanks, Gareth. So if you notice on that slide, what we believe that our purpose is simply to make that design gap go away. So if you look at that carefully, and over a century of innovation in how cars are manufactured and the reliability of vehicles on the road, they're getting better and better over time. These vehicles have very advanced technologies in them. They're very comfortable to sit in. They're increasingly connected to the cloud. But what's happening is that the experience people have is actually deteriorating. And we consider that participating in chaos in a comfortable, safe car, but it's not very productive for what that journey is intended to do, which is to be reliable and safe and productive. Instead, it's congestion, it's chaos, and it's not something that's sustainable. So the purpose of FSM really is to address that very specifically through innovation. And what we mean by that is service innovation. So looking at an appropriate portfolio of services and solutions that we can influence and actually bring to market that is true to our mission as a company, but also very fit for purpose, which is to close that design gap and do it in an expansive way globally, and make it locally relevant. So that's really what Ford Smart Mobility is about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And in terms of that, making it locally relevant, how much of a challenge is it on making those services relevant, well, looking globally, but also thinking about specific solutions on a local level too? Have we still got you there, Raj? Can everyone hear
Can't
me?
hear
Just
Gareth.
to
Sorry.
perfect.
No, I
Sorry.
can hear you.
So,
Yeah.
great. So, in terms of the challenges, what are those challenges that you faced in providing these mobility solutions to a variety of different cities and different companies that you talk about there, providing those local solutions?
Right. So the challenge, the biggest challenge for us is the fact that these services has to be highly relevant locally. It's not a one-size-fit-all global solution. It needs to be bespoke to regulations in a market. It needs to be relevant to the aspiration of a city, regulations in a city, different actors. We're not of a view that we have an ideal solution and our goal is to make it available globally. We have to work to make it relevant in a very specific way. So while the mission really doesn't change, the way we close that design gap varies very widely. The work we've been doing in Europe is very different, for example, than China. And we have to be mission led for sure, but we also have to make sure that our solutions make sense in the local market context.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sure. So when you are looking at that, looking more at the company as a whole, so what is essentially the business model there around the Ford Smart Mobility as a standalone company?
Please, while I give this answer, move to the next slide.
Sure. Yeah.
So what I've shown here is an excerpt from a talk that our chairman, Bill Ford, gave at TED in about 5 years ago. And in that, he basically said that, an acknowledgement that today's transportation models and mobility models really are not capable of working, in the future. And basically what he was saying is we can keep making cars smarter and make them autonomous and make them cloud connected and this, that, or the other. But until those cars have a canvas on which they can achieve efficient service of outcome, it's not a solution that's going to be relevant in the future. We're going to need to have a business model for automotive companies and transportation companies that embraces not just the notion of smart connected vehicles, but also an infrastructure on which they are able to be productive. We need smart roads. We need access to smart parking and also interface between one mode of transport and the next mode of transport. So the way automotive companies enable people to switch modes or be productive across modes is also relevant. So our business model is to be involved and take a leadership position in the design and the build and operation of smart transportation systems per se and services that enable that, because we're really building this for tomorrow. With the scale and roadmap we have is only relevant when we put the lens of in the next 5 to 10 years, how will this play out? So our business model really is to invest in that future, but have a really strong point of view and a clear point of view on that, it's about the infrastructure and the ecosystem, not just about smart vehicles.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what comes across there is in this future, no one exists in a silo right now. It is not just about a single company, it's about a total ecosystem play. And traditionally in this space, the automakers have been the top of the value chain and they've been leading the industry. So from your perspective right now, what role does the automaker specifically take within this ecosystem? Is it the role of, do you believe it's the role of that automaker still to take the initiative and be the driving force behind the future of this smart mobility ecosystem?
Well, I can't speak for other automotive companies, obviously. So I don't know. I can't give an industry answer to that question, but I'll give you our perspective. So we feel that automotive companies will continue to evolve and look less like automotive companies and more as companies that are connected with today's tech cycle. And what I did is I just put some trends on a slide for you, Garrett, if you want to go to that slide. And I'd just like to talk about that for a few minutes, because I think there's a lot of chatter about this kind of companies, transportation companies going to be relevant tomorrow. Is a 100-year-old transportation company a thing of the past? I just want to address that very specifically, because obviously I have a point of view on this. So I feel that, in any strategic dialogue or any explanation of what we are and what we're going to become has to respect the fact that, we are an ecosystem participant, and there are three broad trends that our chairman has talked about and we continue to build on. One is this notion that there's an increasing demand for transportation services, and that's fueled not just by you and I buying more stuff on e-commerce websites and asking for people to bring it to our homes and our place of work within the day. And obviously, that has a huge impact on congestion on the roads and new service models. That's obviously one fact. But I deal with the fact that there's population growth compounded by move to greater urbanization. People are at an increasing pace becoming urbanized, and specifically in our economic model, we look at an additional billion people flocking to the top 90 cities globally, and that's a huge influx of people that want to get to work, want to go out and eat and get to services and so on and so forth. That's going to put an enormous pressure on the system to get more efficient, not just add capacity. It has to get more efficient. The second notion is one of the cloud, and really that this notion of IoT and what was previously called M2M. These are jargons basically to say that things that are participating in the economy have to be self-aware and self-deterministic, but they also have to participate in smart ecosystems. And it's broadly called the Internet of Things. I'm sure you heard of it, Gareth. And
yes.
We interpret that as smart fleets. Vehicles that are participating in delivering services, whether it's transport services or goods movement, have to become smarter over time and embrace the notion that the infrastructure is becoming smart, vehicle-to-vehicle communications is improving, and we have to understand that our fleets that we put out and services that we layer on top of that have to participate in a smarter ecosystem. And the third is end user behavior. You and I love our phones. It's kind of allowing us to become more real time in how we consume information, but also how we requisition services. So we feel that an empowered, connected consumer is going to be the norm and not the exception. And therefore, to your question, what does the mobility ecosystem mean for automakers and how does it evolve? I think it's all of these three things. I think we have to continue to build smart capacity to allow this additional billion people to have access to good mobility options. We need to have all actors in the system enable smart outcomes, smart infrastructure, smart parking, so on and so forth. But also importantly, these things have to be much more demand responsive in that when somebody wants to get somewhere or fetch something, they're looking for a near real-time experience. So automakers have to understand that they can't abdicate that to someone else. That's like an over-the-top service that commoditizes the automotive product. I mean, that's crazy. But brands have to stand up and say, this is the service experience we can deliver in those new demand responsive models. And I think you know which ones I'm referring to. But that's becoming more and more the norm, and that's not slowing down. The desire for people to use their smartphones to engage with the world, engage with one another, engage with their cars and transportation providers is only increasing over time, and to a great extent, it's transforming our business model. So FSM is acutely aware that while we roll out our strategy globally, our roles in society is also changing at a tremendous pace. So we have to be nimble and flexible at the same time.
Yeah, I've got a really interesting question that's just come in from an audience member that I think relates quite nicely to that, in terms of looking at the customer and who Ford's customer is and putting the customer first as part of this proposition of smart mobility. The question is, does FSM address fundamentally different customer segments compared to what would be Ford's typical core business model?
I don't think we address anybody differently. We just I don't think we address any new constituents. We just address these constituents in a different way. So as far as people that buy our vehicles, whether it's a commercial customer or a end user like you and me, we recognize that in addition to buying a vehicle, something like Ford Pass may allow the vehicle owner to have a way to engage with that vehicle through an app. So that obviously is an extension of what's in the vehicle. The experience someone has in the vehicle now has to be available to them outside the vehicle. We know that a good proxy for that is home connected and home automation, where you want to access controls in your home from a remote location. Well, that's an adjacent business model. So that's one way where a relationship is now increasingly defined by this mobile UX, that people want that. But the big difference for me and for us in the last, I guess, couple of years has been this notion that we have to have a deeper involvement with cities. And we're talking about cities from three different stakeholders. There's obviously the Department of Transport that manages streets and curbs in a city. There's the transit authorities that enable mass transit efficiency and mass transport services. And then there's city planners who are looking at new urbanization models and making cities more livable. So we need to engage with that set of stakeholders in a more meaningful way. We obviously have been engaging with them for over 100 years, but more in terms of laying roads and making sure cars are safe on those roads and people are safe in cars, so on and so forth. But I think now we're saying, is the design correct?
Yeah.
Is the purpose of how these design decisions are being made, recognizing the future? Is congestion going away or is it increasing? Is pollution decreasing or increasing over time? Are journeys becoming more or less expensive over time? Should pricing vary based on congestion? Should there be a linear equation or an inverse equation between cost and congestion? So these are economic models. So we have a team within Ford that looks at analytics globally and looks at these data points to inform city planners and the DOT and other stakeholders on how do we make the right decisions over time to improve the design and outcome of that design. And the third stakeholders is really frenemies. Okay, I didn't coin that term. I'm just using it because people understand what it means. So we act in the ecosystem. We can't just say, hey, hang on, guys, this is our soccer field. We're the home team. We play here. Why don't you go build another soccer field over there and you play over there? That's impossible, right? So we have to understand there's a tendency model and there are different actors in the system who intersect when it comes to a common customer or common city, a common purpose. And therefore, we are increasing our participation in industry bodies, in standard setting organizations, and outreach programs, because we feel that we should not attempt to go at this alone. And while it's okay to be a thought leader and it's okay to take the first steps, I think we recognize that many other players have to come along, and this is not a winner-take-all scenario, although some people think it is.
Absolutely. I've got a question here that relates a little bit to that. It said, how does Ford FSM view smart public transportation? Is it a competitor, or is it viewed as just another actor in the value chain? I think that relates to what you were saying there a little.
Yeah, wonderful question. I'm glad somebody asked that. I ponder that every day. So I'll give you a cheeky answer first, and then we can delve into it. We think that public transport is a wonderful ally because they're a demand generator for us. Okay, so what that means is that the decay of public transport actually is an enabler of people that want to switch to different modes of conveyance, albeit be prepared to get into what's called a ride-sharing mode, where they're sharing that ride with many other people. So in a way, the inability for public transport to expand its routes, expand its service schedule, because it's consuming an enormous amount of taxpayers' money. That broken business model actually is a gap that we think we can close by working collaboratively with municipalities and public transit authorities to augment their services. The industry jargon for this is called microtransit, where they're extending the footprint. Best example is paratransit, so in extending that footprint. So the cheeky answer is basically that we actually expect that public transport will not be able to provide that demand, increasing demand, and it is going to get more difficult for people to even access it because it's overcrowded. So that's kind of my first answer. The broader answer would be that we want to design in smarter public transport solutions in the city of tomorrow.
Yeah.
So, if you go to YouTube and Google this, you'll see something called the City of Tomorrow, and we shared this in the Detroit Motor Show in January. A chairman and my boss actually went on stage and talked about this notion. And basically the notion is that we can't imagine a scenario where society is not served by a social platform like public transport. We can't imagine that's going to disappear. Mm-hmm. Instead, we believe that public transport will be players that offer public transport services are governed by public transit authorities, but don't look like a bus, don't look like a train, but look like things in the future. And we have an eye on that. And we made a public kind of video on this, and we put it out there for people to look and comment and engage with us on the evolution of public transport. We know that in some cities, the government is looking to bypass public transport infrastructure altogether, especially smart cities, and get into what's called a public-private partnership. So we recognize that there are different ways to service it, but we bought a company in San Francisco that provides a mass transit type of service. It's demand responsive, but in essence, it is allowing anybody visiting the city to be able to, share a ride with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a theme that's come through in a few questions over the last few minutes, and it's one of the fundamental, I guess, existential questions about smart mobility for an OEM is, does smart mobility result in fewer cars on the roads? And if so, I guess a two-part question, is that the case? And if so, does that represent a threat to the traditional automaker model?
Yeah, good question again. So does it represent a decrease in demand? Absolutely not. And it's not my opinion. You can study the facts. Cars sold versus new modes of accessing vehicles. I guess if I give a parallel, maybe it'll help. Did Airbnb result in fewer hotel rooms being built? No, because Airbnb helped the Brazilian economy host. Rio had to host an additional 900,000 people that wanted rooms. And there are only 450,000 rooms in Rio, so where are people going to stay? They're not going to live on the road, right? So if you draw that analogy to what I start with, which is demand is growing at a non-linear scale right now when it comes to city urbanization. Yeah. And that demand is for not just you and I to be able to get around, is that you and I want to fetch more goods in real time. We want to fetch more services in real time. So the journey demands is growing as a result in a non-linear way. That demand has to be fulfilled in different ways. I agree that in the previous equation, you fulfill those by making more cars and putting more drivers in cars. I think the new equation is not just about people buying more cars to solve that mobility demand question, but it's about participating in new business models. Of course, I feel that some companies that make vehicles will see lower demand for their vehicles because they're not being smart about how they connect to the new reality. Yeah. Certainly Ford is not one of them, and my role is to make sure we don't become one of them. Yeah. But there are threats. There are growing threats. I can't tell you who's going to be my competitor next year. I don't know. They don't have to build a factory and then show us where the factory is, and they don't have to show us how many cars they're going to build in the factory. They don't have to do any of that to become a competitor tomorrow. So I think the threat of new entrants who don't have the need to build factories and don't have the need to manufacture vehicles, but can be very productive in the mobility ecosystem is where I think there's an existential threat. I can't even pronounce that word because I'm so scared of it. But I think that is where the threat is. If you just sit back and say, oh, let's not worry about that. Let's think about it 5 years from now when it's a real threat. I found in my previous roles in different companies that is the existential problem. Is the mindset of the incumbents is the problem and the threat, not the actors in the system. And when you sit back and ponder and half, in a half-assed way try and do something, it's not going to work. So you have to make a full commitment to the new realities. And I think our struggles will be around recognizing where these new threats are and being able to, use both a short-term lens to make sure we're productive, but also long-term lens to say, can we get stronger over time so that these new threats don't impact us as greatly as it might impact other actors in the system. So I don't think any of the things we're doing is driven by a threat or a fear, but rather an opportunity to enable those new business models.
Yeah, and so someone's just raised a very good point in one of their questions. One of the great strengths of automakers is their reach through their dealer network. And someone's asked how Ford thought about how they're going to integrate the retail dealer body into their mobility introductions. Has it been done to date? Or if so, is there a plan for how to integrate that network into spreading the mobility message and this new business model?
Right. So we think that it's going to happen in 3 waves. I'll speak to the first wave right now, and I won't talk about the others because it's not fair to talk about the future. So let me just tell you what's happening right now. So when I mentioned that company that we purchased in San Francisco, one of the things that our dealers are very good at is once you buy a vehicle, the service experience after that. They're really good at that. Now we feel that it's not just about parts and service, but it's about enabling vehicles that are in ride-sharing modes and ride-hailing modes and car-sharing modes need a lot more service than cars that are owned by you and me that sit in the garage, 16 hours in a day or 20 hours a day, right?
Sure.
So the strain of running those cars more often means that those cars require fueling and require service more often than any other vehicle. So dealers have to expand the way they're able to provide those services without telling you, why don't you drop your car off at 7:30 in the morning and then I'll give you a call back when it's ready. And if it's not convenient for you to pick it up today, why don't you come back tomorrow? That's not going to work, right? Because people just do not, when you get into ride sharing and car sharing, it's not a mode that really works. And instead of creating a parallel universe, we're helping our dealers become more acutely capable of delivering quicker turnaround services, and we have actually a business in that space right now, quickly, and so we're doing that globally. But beyond that, we think that dealers are key to making the existing vehicle fleets that are in the marketplace and people's currently owned vehicles connect to the cloud, right? So for every, in the U.S., we buy in total 15 to 16 million vehicles a year, similar to China. But we are outnumbered by the number of vehicles that are already in the system. And if you want the whole system to get better, then the dealers and the existing actors have to retrofit or upfit these vehicles to become, smart and to be capable of participating in the new economy. So we feel that dealers are the tip of the spear in doing that. And you're absolutely right. We created a dealer model, so we're very excited about our dealers globally and helping them enable vehicles to become smart. And as new formats of vehicles and autonomous vehicles come to market, that dependency actually is going to grow because there isn't actually someone that's going to make a decision. What time should I go? That's going to be more and more automated. It's going to be based on new algorithms that are being built around how to automate that footprint. So yes, we are doing a lot. We recognize the strength of the dealer network. We recognize the relationships they have with millions of our customers and the trust that they have with them, as well as the fact that they're a key constituent in cities. And they're only going to get stronger over time, not weaker, in our opinion.
Yeah, and we'll take just a couple more questions before we wrap things up. Again, one of the themes that's come through, and I think it was pretty obvious that people were going to be talking about it, is the role of the autonomous vehicle. We're talking about the future of Ford Smart Mobility. Where do you see right now the role of the autonomous vehicle in this vision for the future of the company?
So I think AV is inevitable. I think anybody fighting against a future of AV is probably going to be left behind. AVs aren't going to be the only form of transport. There are other forms of transport. So, we are looking at what kinds of roles AVs will play in society, both in the initial 5 years of AVs being deployed, but also in the longer term, where they would play out. So, I can't speak to either of them right now on the call, but I can just tell you that we've made several public announcements about what we're doing, we are ahead of several other AV efforts in the market, and we want to keep it that way. But we recognize that we can't predict where everything exactly will land 5 years from now. It's impossible to do that. We certainly know what we are going to get done in 5 years, and that's what we focus on.
Absolutely. So, a few people, you've come from a background and not necessarily from the automotive industry itself, coming into what is one of the hottest industries in the world right now, and the most exciting, fastest moving spaces. Just on a personal level, how have you found the experience of coming into the auto industry? And a couple of questions have come through along this line of, you have, as a company, are going through this huge process and taking a bold step to reinvent yourself for the future, to set themselves up for where we're going. If you had, coming into this business, working in it, if you had some advice to other companies out there listening right now about how to get on board with this trend and look at how they structure their business and think about the future, do you have any recommendations for them right now about how they should go about getting on board with this trend and making sure they are maximizing their opportunity in it?
Yeah, I think having a broader lens than the strategic lens that typically automotive companies have built huge strength in is very helpful. I think on one of the slides I showed you the 3 mega trends that are impacting not just automotive companies. I could use that slide to explain the impact on any industry. So, from my perspective, the only advice I'd like to share is that having a new look at the existing models in the industry and how they impact the overall performance of the system is just as important as understanding an organization's capability to shape its future. What I mean by that is having an outside-in view. So, my interest in coming to Ford and taking on this role was really around what he just said, the amount of innovation capacity available to solve this issue of congestion and pollution and making cities more livable is really a very, very attractive charter. And one has to take a much broader view than just an automotive company to be productive in figuring out how to participate. And those choices, I think, can lead to very attractive margin opportunity for automotive companies. I think it's one thing to be scaled up and make vehicles and earn a fantastic return on making it, but it's a whole other thing to be somewhat more of a software company and a tech company in the automotive business. Those are two completely separate, challenges. I'm obviously focused on the latter, and I think that's where the big innovation opportunity is how do we get better over time by adding those pieces that we are not very good at, and if we haven't scaled up yet, as we add those things and get really good at scaling it up, that's going to be accretive to the entire company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got one final question before we move on, because it's about 4 or 5 questions on exactly the same theme came in just before I was about to close. And it's an issue which affects everyone listening to this webinar right now, I'm sure, because it's something that the whole industry needs to deal with, and that is the terms of cybersecurity. And the more and more we connect to things and industries connect to other industries and automotive plugs into the Internet of Things, obviously the more that becomes a very significant issue. So as a company and as someone that's creating an ecosystem, how does Ford Smart Mobility approach the topic of cybersecurity?
Yeah, so at this point, I don't want to comment about cybersecurity from connectivity to a vehicle, specifically the famous hacking of vehicles and all that nice stuff. So that is being addressed in a completely different level in the company because it deals with the PID and deals with the OBU. In FSM, we are in partnership with some of the larger tech companies that put data in the cloud and maintain data in the cloud with us. So we've got those set up. We have a cyber security team, and we don't want to safeguard data. That's not just our purpose. Our purpose is to make data safe to share, and make that data more valuable because of sharing. I think it's one thing to say, can we protect all that data and prevent someone from accessing it? We want to continue doing that, but we also want to answer the second question, which is, okay, if you've done that really well, how do you make that data shareable so that when other participants have permission to access that data and collaborate on that data, that it's done in a way that's safeguarded as well. So I think the mobility of data is just as important as the security of data, and we're working a lot on making that data secure as it moves through a value chain.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I think it's probably about time to wrap up. Sorry. Are you any final thoughts, or are we good to wrap things up there, Raj?
No, I appreciate these questions. It's very productive to have a conversation like this with you, and I appreciate your time. And thanks to all the participants asking super smart questions. It's good. It's great.
Well, first and foremost, thank you very much, Raj, for joining us today. It's been, I think, a really great opportunity to see inside a company that's clearly at the forefront, has been at the forefront of the industry for many years, but is reinventing themselves as we go forward into this new era of automotive and new era of smart mobility. And we've had a record amount of questions over the last few minutes, and apologies if we didn't get to any of yours. However, this is not the end of the conversation. If you've enjoyed today's insights, Raj will be continuing the conversation. He will be part of our headline sessions at TU-Automotive Detroit conference on June 6th and 7th in Novi, Michigan. The Detroit conference is the world's biggest event dedicated to the future of connected car and smart mobility. There'll be over 3,000 people there from over 30 companies. And in addition to Raj, we'll also have senior execs on stage addressing the topics of connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles, and smart mobility from GM, Lyft, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, IBM, Intel, and many, many more. The information is on the screen right there. But if you want to get on the website, it is tu-auto.com/Detroit. And as a listener of today's webinar, I'd like to offer you all listening an exclusive $150 discount on any of the tickets you may purchase to attend the event. Simply go to the website and use the code on your screen, WEB150, when you go there. I really do hope you'll join us. It's going to be an amazing event. We've been doing it for 17 years, and it's shaping up to be our biggest and best ever. A really inspiring 2 days. And as I say, Raj will be there on stage in person. And as a final piece of business, as it mentions on stage, on the screen, I will send around the audio recording of the webinar over the next few days so you can listen back and share with colleagues alike. So thank you very much to Raj for his insights today, and hopefully I look forward to seeing you all at TU Automotive Detroit on June 7th and 8th. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Take care.